You think you understand Dune. You think it's just a story about desert warriors, prophecy, and giant sandworms. But the deeper you look, the more unsettling the details become. Because the world of Dune was never built to be heroic. It was built to be inevitable. One of the darkest facts about Dune is that Paul Atreides was never meant to exist the way he does. He was born one generation too early because Lady Jessica disobeyed the Bene Gesserit, and that single act of love destabilized a genetic plan that had been carefully engineered for centuries. That means the most powerful man in the universe is technically a mistake, not a success, and yet everything bends around him as if he were destiny itself. Another disturbing detail is that the Bene Gesserit seeded entire planets with religious myths long before Paul ever arrived. Meaning the Freeman prophecy was not divine revelation, but PI-installed psychological infrastructure. A survival tool designed to be exploited by one of their own if necessary. When Paul steps into the role of Muad'Dib, he is not creating belief. He is activating something that was already embedded in the culture, which makes the revolution feel less spontaneous and more like a trap waiting to be triggered. Then there is the spice, often treated as a valuable resource, but in reality it is the single substance holding the entire galactic civilization together. Because without it, the navigators of the Spacing Guild cannot see safe paths through space. And without safe interstellar travel, the Empire collapses instantly. This means Arrakis is not just politically important, it is structurally essential, and whoever controls it controls the flow of time and movement across the universe. Another fact that changes everything is that the Freeman dream of terraforming Arrakis into a green paradise would eventually destroy the sandworms. And without sandworms there is no spice, and without spice there is no empire, which means the very victory they fight for contains the seed of galactic collapse. Even Paul understands this paradox, that saving Arrakis could doom humanity's ability to navigate the stars. And then there is the jihad, which is often framed as a future Paul tries to avoid. But what makes it terrifying is that even in timelines where he dies early, violence still spreads in his name, suggesting that the idea of Paul is more powerful than the man himself. Dune quietly reveals that symbols once created no longer require their creators to survive. Another detail many overlook is that the Sardorka, the Emperor's elite warriors, are shaped by an environment just as brutal as Arrakis, proving that fanaticism and strength are products of extreme conditions, not moral superiority. This mirrors the Freeman and suggests that every dominant force in Dune is born from suffering, not righteousness. And perhaps the most chilling fact of all is that Paul's greatest power is not physical or political, but temporal. He sees paths others cannot. Yet that same ability strips him of surprise, spontaneity, and even genuine choice. The more he sees, the less free he becomes, turning prescience into a prison disguised as enlightenment. Dune was never just about who wins the throne. It was about how every system in the universe is interconnected, fragile, and dependent on forces most people inside the story barely understand. And once you realize how many layers were manipulated, engineered, or biologically predetermined long before the first battle even began, it becomes impossible not to wonder how much of Dune is actually about destiny, and how much of it is about carefully constructed inevitability that no one was ever meant to escape. Another fact that completely changes how you see Dune is that technology in this universe is deliberately limited, not because humanity forgot how to innovate, but because it chose to fear its own creations. Thousands of years before Paul's time, thinking machines nearly wiped out humanity, and the aftermath was so traumatic that advanced artificial intelligence was banned entirely, forcing society to evolve human minds instead of computers. This is why mentats exist, human calculators trained to process data with machine-like precision, and why the Bene Gesserit refine memory and perception to superhuman levels. The entire political structure of Dune is built on controlled human evolution rather than technological progress, which means every powerful figure is the result of conditioning, breeding, or mental discipline rather than machinery. Another unsettling detail is that the Spacing Guild navigators are physically mutated by prolonged spice exposure, transforming into barely recognizable beings who sacrifice their bodies for the ability to see safe routes through space. Their dependence on spice makes them silent partners in every political decision, because they can refuse transport to anyone who threatens their supply. This means the Empire is not ruled only by the Emperor or noble houses, but by mutated prescient beings floating in spice gas, quietly ensuring their survival above all else. Then there is the fact that House Harkonnen does not rely solely on cruelty for dominance, but on economic precision, squeezing Arrakis for maximum spice output with ruthless efficiency, which ironically makes them structurally similar to Paul later on. The difference is not brutality, but justification. One of the most ironic truths in Dune is that Paul uses the same mechanisms of control as his enemies: propaganda, fear, resource dominance, but wraps them in prophecy instead of profit. Another detail often missed is that the crysknife, sacred to the freemen, must never be drawn without drawing blood, symbolizing how violence in Dune is ritualized and normalized from the ground up. This cultural conditioning ensures that when the jihad begins, it does not feel like a moral shift, but like an extension of identity. And perhaps one of the most haunting facts is that prescience in Dune does not reveal infinite possibilities equally. It strengthens certain futures by observing them, meaning that the more Paul focuses on avoiding one catastrophe, the more other paths fade from visibility. In a way, the act of seeing the future narrows it, creating a self-fulfilling gravity around specific outcomes. That means Paul may not just be predicting events, he may be reinforcing them by giving them attention. The universe of Dune operates on fragile balances: ecological, political, psychological, and once you understand how each system depends on another, you begin to see that collapse is always one decision away. Every house, every order, every culture believes it understands the game, but the game itself is older and more complex than any one player. And the deeper you look into these hidden mechanics, the harder it becomes to tell whether Dune is a story about power at all, or a warning about what happens when a civilization builds itself on forces it can never fully control. There is another layer to Dune that most viewers never fully process, and it might be the most dangerous one of all, because beneath the politics, beneath the prophecy, beneath the war for Arrakis, the real experiment has always been humanity itself. The Bene Gesserit do not simply influence bloodlines. They collect ancestral memories through the spice agony, meaning every reverend mother carries centuries of lived experience inside her mind, entire lifetimes whispering advice, fear, and manipulation at once. Paul does something unprecedented when he survives the water of life. He unlocks both male and female ancestral memory, stepping into a psychological landscape no human was meant to endure. And that means his mind is never truly alone again. Imagine ruling an empire while hearing the accumulated voices of history debating inside your skull, pushing you towards certain decisions, reminding you of old mistakes, amplifying paranoia. And then consider this: if Paul can see possible futures and access the totality of the past, where does his own identity even begin? Another fact that makes Dune even darker is that the Freemen are not naturally united under Paul. They are gradually transformed into an organized religious war machine, trained, mythologized, and militarized with terrifying speed. What begins as survival in the desert becomes crusade across the stars, and the speed of that shift suggests that belief systems, once ignited, evolve faster than any single leader can contain. Even more unsettling is the ecological truth about Arrakis. The sandworms are not just giant predators. They are the creators of spice through their life cycle, meaning the most valuable substance in the universe comes from a brutal, almost alien biological process that humanity barely understands. Control the worm, control the spice, control the future, but no one truly controls the worm. And hidden in all of this is a question that Dune never answers directly. Is humanity evolving towards something higher, or simply concentrating power into fewer and fewer hands until collapse becomes mathematically inevitable? Paul believes he is choosing the least catastrophic path, the narrow corridor where humanity survives. But survival in Dune often demands sacrifice on a scale that erases entire cultures. The more he tightens his grip on destiny, the more destiny tightens around him. And here is the final, unsettling thought. What if the true villain in Dune is not Paul, not the Emperor, not the Harkonnens, but prescience itself? The idea that knowing the future justifies controlling the present, because once someone claims they see the only path forward, who is left brave enough to question them? And if no one can question the one who sees tomorrow, then maybe the most dangerous moment in the entire Dune saga is not the war for Arrakis, but the day the universe decides that Paul Atreides must be obeyed, no matter the cost.